everybody, it is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and welcome back to another episode of Stats, Trends, and Picks, this time for April 2022. And if you happen to be watching on a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Well, I have got to say that April was definitely one of the more interesting months that I have seen so far in 2022. There was a lot to talk about, there were a lot of interesting things that happened in comic book news, as well as a whole bunch of brand new issues that have been released, and some very big events that are now seeing a little bit more fruition in regards to what we're going to be getting this summer, particularly from the big two. But one of the few things that I definitely am curious about is what happened with me in terms of my purchasing, because the biggest piece of news that people are hearing right now is the fact that DC Comics, as well as all of Warner Media, is about to go through a massive overhaul now that the Warner Discovery merger has been completed. And the head of operations is definitely planning to put DC under the hot seat and start really trying to figure out what is it about DC that is happening right now and how can we possibly make it better. Because we hear the complaints, okay? As far as the comic book community here on YouTube, I don't think there is a single person that is actually saying anything remotely positive about DC as a whole. Everybody seems to be angry, everybody seems to be suffering from Batman fatigue, and I, for one, was really curious to see where I was going to go in terms of reading, especially last year post-Future State. And I saw myself continuing to read DC Comics. And when we take a look at the purchasing numbers of April 2022, not only did we see a sharp decline in the amount of books that I purchased, 10 books have officially dropped off. We're now in the 40s in terms of collecting books in a monthly basis, and based on the forecasting, it's going to continue to drop. But, as someone who agrees with everything that people are saying about DC Comics, why is it that my purchasing numbers of DC skyrocketed this past month? This was a massive jump. Could it possibly be that 2 titles in DC that I was reading were pushed off and finally came out in April instead of March? Is it because of the fact that I actually decided to give a current Batman crossover a try? Or is it just because of the hype that is revolving around the Summer Dark Crisis story event? I don't know. But considering the fact that DC saw the largest amount of comics purchased, and the fact that Image saw the least amount of comics purchased, I don't even know what's going on here. I think it may be because of the fact that a lot of the Image titles that I'm reading are actually on hiatus at the moment. I mean, there's no Echolands, Department of Truth hasn't been going on, Stillwater hasn't been going on, so it's been interesting. Especially when we take a look at the percentages so we get a clearer picture. Almost 40% of my purchasing went to DC Comics. That's crazy. And a quarter of it went to all the miscellaneous companies. And I am just blown away by these thoughts. I really want to know more about this. I want to have more of a discussion with members of the comic book community. So please, if you're watching this video, put a comment. I'd love to talk to you because I am just finding this quite fascinating. And in terms of going to the line graph, we're actually finally seeing that dynamic element that I said was going to probably happen. I mean, look at this. Look at the blue and look at the purple. And more importantly, look at the red. Marvel really has been taking a slight plunge downward, but Image took a gigantic plunge, and DC just had a massive upswing. It's crazy. And the miscellaneous seems to just be consistent, but I am shocked by what's going on with DC Comics right now. And I've also got to admit, when I take a look at my forecasting numbers for May and June, I'm seeing a lot of DC Comics. I definitely need to figure this out. And in the meantime, let's see if my guesses for my top picks in April were actually ringing true, and what do we have in store for May? So I gotta say that I'm very excited because of the fact that there's a lot to talk about here in terms of picks from last month and picks for the upcoming month, but it is cool to say I almost had a perfect new purchasing month in April. I went 3 for 4. And could I have gone 4 for 4? Yes, but there's a big reason as to why it didn't happen. So we're going to start off with the first week of April, and I also want to say that even though there were a decent amount of comics purchased, even though there was a decline, I also will say that it was a bit of a slow month. It's not that it was an extremely bad reading month. There just didn't seem to be anything that was truly, truly incredible. And the ones that really were incredible, I did make note. And the top pick for the first week of April was the Boom Studios book Alice Ever After, written by Dan Panosian, and I had a feeling that this was going to be my number one pick just because of the premise of the book. I know that there were a lot of people that were saying that it was a little too dark. They didn't like the fact that it still took place in the time period of Lewis Carroll's classic, but felt that that's exactly what we were going to get, and I just have to say that this book is far from perfect, but it's the start of a 5-issue miniseries, and like Alice, it left me curiouser and curiouser. I am very interested in this take on Alice. I'm very curious as to all the questions that I have after the end of the first issue. And yes, I am actually very excited for the rest of this series to unfold. So I would say that if you are a Lewis Carroll fan and a big fan of Alice in Wonderland, and you just want to see a very interesting take on this character, check this one out. I think you might be surprised, maybe not impressed, maybe even disgusted, but it will definitely be something that you're going to be thinking about when you put it down. The second week of April, I gave it to Geoff Johns' Flashpoint Beyond issue number 0. I had a feeling that this was going to be big based on the preview that I read, and it did not disappoint. I am extremely curious as to where this 6-issue miniseries is going to go. That's not including issue number 0. I am very excited for all of the people that are part of this. Well, maybe not Tim Sheridan, but I know for a solid fact that Jeremy Adams is on this book as well alongside Geoff Johns, and there are a lot of people that are saying that his Flash run is really, really good, and I haven't read it. So I want to read some Jeremy Adams, and I want to see what he's all about. But I loved the fact that Flashpoint Beyond went into some areas that a lot of fans of DC Comics, particularly the Rebirth era, we really did enjoy it. And Geoff Johns went back to it. And I've got to admit, it's got me very curious as to how this story is going to unfold, and how it's also going to partake in the current events that are taking place right now in DC. So I know that Flashpoint Beyond issue number 1 is coming early in May, and I'm very excited to read it. For the third week of April, I knew I was going to give it to Mark Waid's Batman Superman World's Finest. It's also crazy to believe that both this and Flashpoint Beyond, 2 DC titles, again, the DC events of April seem to be spilling into my top picks as well. Batman Superman World's Finest issue number 1 was flat out fun. True vintage comic book fun. And I had a feeling it was going to be just as fun in issue number 2. And it was. I loved some of the characters that showed up, including Doom Patrol. I loved the encounters of Robin and Supergirl. They had a really hilarious banter in the middle of the book that just made me laugh out loud. And I'm really curious to see where this first story arc is going to go. It's definitely enjoyable. The art is great. Dan Mora is incredibly good at what he's doing here. And I also want to remind myself of a conversation that I had with the guy who runs my local comic shop when I bought issue number 1. He said that this was everything you would want out of a Batman or Superman comic because Mark Waid gets these characters. Most importantly, he makes Superman smile throughout this story. And I said to him in response, well, shouldn't Superman be smiling all the time? And he said to me, you're damn right. So, yeah, World's Finest issue number 2 was great. I am so excited for issue number 3. And I was going to give the last top pick of April to crossover issue number 13 from Donny Cates over at Image Comics, but wouldn't you know, there still seems to be a problem with the paper, and crossover 13 got pushed into May. And considering that it was a massive week because there were so many books that got pushed into the last week of April, I was curious as to what I was going to give the top pick to. And it ended up going to the IDW title, the long-awaited finale to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, issue number 5. This was everything I wanted this story to be, especially considering the fact that the penultimate issue fell a little flat for me. But we got exactly what we were hoping for in the conclusion of this story. There was incredible action, there was a lot of drama, there was a moment that basically told me to tell my friends, keep a box of tissues handy by your side if you're reading this last book, and the epilogue is just uplifting. The fact that Eastman and Laird came back to co-write this story, that's one of the main reasons why I purchased this book. I never had another Ninja Turtle comic since the Image reboot with issue number 1, which was just okay, and I never purchased anything after that, but this was the first complete series of Ninja Turtles, 5 issues, priced well, and I just have to say, this was one of the very best comics that I have read in a very, very long time. I will revisit this series again, especially because of the fact that it's only 5 issues, and you can bet your bottom dollar that my friends over here with me at That's Comical will be adding this to our must-be-read video recording list. One of the other things that I must also say about this past month is the unsung hero was Batman. I know, we are suffering from Batman fatigue, but there has been something truly awesome happening that I just have not been talking about. We got, in anticipation to Dark Crisis, another Batman crossover epic tale, and it is being written by Joshua Williamson, and it is the Shadow War. He has officially tied in his current run on Batman with his Deathstroke Inc. run, as well as his Robin run, and ever since I picked up Shadow War Alpha, I have just been excited, because this is just an action-packed, fun ride. It's not the greatest, most unique comic ever written. It's just Josh Williamson doing what Josh Williamson does. And considering the fact that we are getting parts number 5, 6, and 7 starting in the beginning of May, and Batman is going to continue to get better after Josh Williamson leaves the books and Shadow War ends, because we've got Chip Zdarsky writing Batman, and we've got Ram V and Cy Spurrier writing Detective Comics. So it's going to be a very interesting summer for Batman, but I am going to say, check out Shadow War. It so far has been one of my favorite and most entertaining reads in the last month, and I'm really looking forward to the crossover continuing in May. So that wraps up what happened in April. What are we in store for in May? Well, the thing that makes me very excited is the fact that it is Free Comic Book Day in May. The first Saturday of every May is Free Comic Book Day since 2002, so this is a big anniversary year, but the truth of the matter is, there's a very good chance that I will not be partaking this year, merely because of the fact that I am officially on baby watch, and my new baby is due any day now. But the most important thing is, I have gotten my Free Comic Book Day books put aside for me, so they're going to be waiting for me when I'm finally able to come to the store. So I am hoping that I am going to be able to get to the store this first week of May to at least get my new books, if anything. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out in May, even though I'm seeing another small decline in my purchasing, which is fine, because it's all about the quality, not about the quantity. But I am definitely excited for some of the books that I am going to be reading next month. We're going to start off with the first week of May, and we're going to give it to the third installment of Peter David's Maestro World War M over at Marvel Comics. Issue 2 was amazing. It almost was my top pick last month when it came out. It's just so fun. Peter David knows exactly what he's doing when it comes to capturing that nostalgic feel of comic books. He's doing it in the Symbiote Spider-Man series, and he is just rocking the house with this Maestro trilogy. It is going to be really sad to see this trilogy come to an end. I'm hoping that Maestro will make a return some way or another, and that Peter David will write it, but I'm just looking forward to a fun time in the pages of Maestro World War M3. For the second week of May, this is going to be an interesting one, merely because of the fact that there's some really good stuff coming out, including Donny Cates' beginning of his Thor-Hulk crossover over at Marvel Comics, which is called Banners of War. It was supposed to come out in April, but it got pushed off. But yeah, and Crossover 13 is finally coming out that week as well. But as much as I would love to see Crossover 13 still be my top pick. It's not going to, because there was a big surprise that was announced a few weeks ago, and it is coming out on this week. And it is a limited 6-issue series from DC Comics, Jurassic League. This is basically the DC superheroes that we know and love, but they're dinosaurs. Now, the question that you're probably asking yourself is, why would anyone want this book? The truth is, I agree with you. But when I found out that Daniel Warren Johnson was writing it and doing some of the art, I was like, okay, Daniel Warren Johnson is great. He knows how to have so much fun. Beta Ray Bill's miniseries recently was incredibly fun, so I am just expecting Jurassic League to be so awesome. Just awesome. Not the best comic that I ever read, but I'm just expecting a fun time with all 6 issues. So yeah, Jurassic League #1. I definitely am surprised that this is even happening, but the fact that they're putting a great writer on this book makes it all the more exciting to read. For the 3rd week of May, I am definitely going to give it to Batman Superman World's Finest over at DC Comics. Another DC title. I cannot believe it. See, here we go again. We've got DC just racking it up. So I am giving it to World's Finest #3 because I had fun with issue #1. It was a top pick. I loved issue #2. It was a top pick. So why would issue #3 be any different? I mean, if it ends up not making the top spot, it only means that something bigger and better came out. Because if anything, this will end up being the runner-up, or if anything, in the top 3. So I definitely will say that you have got to check out Batman Superman World's Finest. You will just have so much fun. And finally, for the last week of May, one of the main reasons that I said earlier why my image intake has declined is simply because of the fact that a lot of the stories that I've been reading are on hiatus. And now they're finally coming back. Stillwater's coming out in May, thank goodness. Still no word on Echolands, though. But at the end of May, we are finally getting the newest issue of the Department of Truth. Issue #18 from Image Comics, James Tynion IV. Knowing that we're going to get a brand new story arc, we're finally going back to present time. Cole is going to be back in the spotlight, and we're going to be learning of the Bizarro, or the arch nemesis of the Department of Truth in these couple of issues, the Ministry of Lies. We were teased about it in issue #17, which is definitely an awesome issue, but I am really excited to see this story continue because the Department of Truth has just been one of the most unique reads that I have read in comics in general, and I'm hoping that you will enjoy it as well. And that's going to wrap up my stats, trends, and picks for April 2022. Please put your comments in the box below. I would love to hear what you guys have been reading, and I'd love to know what you've been enjoying the most and what you are most excited for in May. And in the meantime, everybody, I'm hoping that you're all doing well, and I'll see you in the next one.